2,050 years ago, an army stood poised and still. The writings about that time say that it was a profound stillness, just a light breeze blowing, the clinking of armor and swords, snorting of a horse, the squeak a bit of a cart. And separate from the army, some distance away, standing alone, was the army's commander, dreaming the unimaginable. That commander was Julius Caesar, and the army stood poised on a little small nondescript river called the Rubicon. He was imagining the unimaginable, to turn his legions and cross the river and march on Rome. It was a profanity in a way. It was outrageous. And in some ways, I think it symbolizes the moment that we stand at now, to cross the Rubicon, to take business towards the unimaginable. And I'll come to that in a while. 3 months ago, several hundred feet underneath London, in the London Underground, myself, hundreds, thousands of others traveling through the Underground. I get off the train. I walk along with all the people. You know how it is. I'm sure you've been there. We go packed in the corridor, shuffling along, move round along another corridor. We come to the foot of the escalators. I'm waiting in the queue before placing my foot on that escalator, and suddenly I hear behind a sort of a sound that's different from all the sounds that we've expected. There's a screeching, a breaking, there's a gasp, a huge gasp comes funneling along the channel. Somebody calls out, "No, no!" And then there's a sort of a sound of all the brakes just full on, the whole train juddering to a halt. There are screams and cries and gasps and people just involuntary, just screaming. And we stand there at the foot of the escalator, me and those other people. And in that moment was a choice. And people started piling onto the escalator and heading up out of the Underground, and some others just stood there. And in that moment I thought, how can I possibly just exit? I have to go back. So I was fighting my way against people who are piling out of now. They're running, they're panicked, they're frightened. There was an old person slammed against the side of the Underground. They'd dropped something, they tried to pick it up, they couldn't get it. I fought my way through, sliding along the edge, came round the corners, back along that same corridor, turned left, turned right, and came out onto the station platform. And there's a train, motionless, and the body of this guy crushed up against the side of the platform. He's still, but still twitching. And gathered around him is a circle of people, maybe 50, 100 people. They stood, he's just there. We're stood in a circle and nobody moves. What was extraordinary is how long it took me to get from the foot of the escalator through the tunnels to that place. It wasn't just like that. There was seconds and seconds. Let's feel that time. There was 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, and we go on, 11 and 12 and 14 and 15. Nobody moved. I ducked down, went down to the body, trying to remember my first aid. I checked breathing and I tilted his head back to clear the air passage. I tried, in my panic, trying to remember the different things that I'd been taught. I actually forgot to move down the body, checking the bones. But I'm whispering to the guy, I'm whispering to him, it's okay. I'll be with you. I'll hold you. It's okay. I didn't know whether he was conscious or not. I knew he was still breathing. Suddenly I realized this circle of people is still stood still. And this was not just Brits, it's London, okay? So it's all kinds of nationalities. We're all still. Somebody sound the alarm quickly, please. Carry on working. It's okay, it's okay. Another 5, 10 seconds. Still motionless. Would somebody please call the alarm? Get help. And the third time, I won't say what I said, but I screamed it. And the guy answered me saying, we've done it. They're coming. You know, I have reflected on that time. And it feels to me that this is a parable of our times now. We are business people. We hold within our ranks some of the brightest and best people that are there, available. We hunt them, don't we? And we call them into our organizations. Some of the most extraordinary people are in business, but the most extraordinary thing for me is not that they are bright or clever or all the rest of it, but they are people who are focused on making stuff happen. And here we go about our work. But what is happening in this wider context of our society and our earth? I guess we know because it's everywhere. We know, for instance, that the IPCC came out just a short while ago saying it is a road to nowhere. There is a huge collision that is going to take place. We know many of you are involved and work with member parts of WWF who are there with your organizations, who have that information. The information is all there. But in truth, though we have made great steps, wonderful steps, towards sustainability and other corporate social responsibility, the truth is, as I understand it, that as the populations of India and China and all these other emerging nations rise and demand their products from Philips, their products from Unilever, their products from all the organizations that we have here, then anything that we have done so far to protect that future will be engulfed in a storm of buying and wanting and needing, and that is located to the purpose of our organizations to sell more. Now the thing is, are we responsible? What is leadership within this? Well, how does it look like? Is this something that should concern us? If I was to ask you, if we were to be asked, if somebody was to ask me, what is the purpose of a human life? I'm sure we get a lot of thinking and give me a bit of time. If we asked the Kogi Indians of Colombia, they would look at us like we were simple, that we were, somehow missed on the first 10 years of education. Their answer is simple from every single one of them: to care for all living things. If we were to ask the Native Americans who mentored me over a 20-year period, what is the purpose of a human life? They answered it this way. They said, in our councils of chiefs, women and men of power who use this power to make things happen, in our circles of chiefs, our councils, we have a small fire that is set in the center of that council, and it's lit, and we call it the children's fire. And it's there to remind the chiefs, the leaders, of the first law. No action, no decision, nothing of any kind will be permitted that will harm the children 7 generations to come. they challenged me to speak to business audiences about this. They said there is no power on this earth greater than that which we now know of all these brands, the corporations, the organizations that have the capacity to make things happen. Can you imagine, Mac, what would happen if the leaders and boards of these organizations said, no product, no service, nothing in any way that, and the manner in which our business does business will be allowed to harm the children 7 generations to come? Can you imagine the impact on our society? Because it is not currently true. So many good people, exactly the same proportion of good people in organizations as there are in the NGOs or anywhere else. Startling, amazing people. What is our responsibility? You know, I think we stand at a time now when we need to redefine the purpose of business. If we don't, we will go on focusing to purposes which say that we wish to be the most competitive, that say that we wish to be the top in our field. We will continue in all of those paths and we will be successful, but it'll be a hollow victory. Just a few years ago, only a couple of years ago, I went to Kenya. I went to Kenya with a group of bankers. They were all the top bankers from around the world of their bank. You know their bank well. And we went into the slums of Nairobi because they were being given a question, do we as bankers owe anything to the world's poor? And when they came back, you know, and I have to tell you to get a sense of this, okay, there was rivers of shit through the streets that we were walking through. There were bodies lying on the ground. The pickup trucks go in there every morning, load the bodies, take them out. It stank. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people, an endless sea of misery. Do we as bankers? But it's not just bankers, because we're very fond, aren't we, of creating those that are the good people and the bad people. It's not just business people, of course, it's everybody, all of us. Who are the children? Is it just my children? Just your children? You know, I feel every organization is hunting that discretionary part that a human being will give you if they are inspired. What could be greater than to locate a business's purpose and values around the deep longing within inside every human being to feel proud of what they've done during this lifetime? What if we were to re-examine the purpose of business and say, with all our expertise, with all our intelligence, with all our experience, with all the capacity we have to make things happen, what could our business do that will serve the future well? Radically, not just some little tinkering and somehow nudge things round a bit so it looks kind of all right. No, radically, profoundly. Imagine then if you were able to go to your people and say, our organization, we named this as our purpose. I'm sure the shareholders will start getting a bit wobbly and worried about this, but you say, this is the purpose. And the means for us to achieve that will be the strong, competitive organization that we will align underneath that purpose. That is what Ray Anderson did with Interface. I don't know if you know the Interface story, but it's extraordinary. This man who was an absolute, through the core of him, an industrialist, who happened to read Paul Hawkins' book, The Ecology of Commerce, and had an epiphany. And then stood there and said, our company will have zero negative impact on the earth, zero negative impact on the earth. and ultimately we will dream that it will have positive impacts. If you go to Interface now and ask those people, what does your company do? They will not say carpet tiles. They will say we are here at the vanguard of something which is about reinventing business as a power for transformation, positive transformation in the world. And I don't think they have to motivate their people to work hard. They are so proud. They feel so good that that is what their business is truly about. Now the fact is that in a very few short moments now, I will have finished speaking. And perhaps one or two of you, some of you maybe, will have felt touched, will have glimpsed perhaps a possibility. But the greatest challenge that you will face, that I face every day, is that then we walk out of the door and the world is normal and everything's normal and everything reassures us that we have to do nothing much really, and it was just a talk anyway. But what is leadership? Well, I have worked at IMD Business School. I've been at INSEAD in Singapore. I've been at so many different business schools now. I honestly believe that I hear nothing, hardly anything taught in those places that is about leadership. Leadership is a choice. How do we know that? Because countless people who've done extraordinary things in this world never prepared for it, never went and trained ready to do it. The situation arrived, they felt called, and they stepped forward. Why cannot that be me or you? Leadership is a choice. It's an invitation to become truly courageous. It's an invitation to explore deeply for you what would make a beautiful life, in order that we might one day achieve what Charles Eisenstein has called the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. So I'll finish now just to say this. When I was in Kenya that time, and the bankers had gone, and I was sat in the foyer of the hotel waiting for my flight, this woman came walking across, and I spotted her, and I thought, I've got just a few seconds to try to interrupt her as she passes me by. I would love to have a conversation with that woman. And I can't remember what I did, but I successfully stopped her in her tracks, and she stopped. And we had a coffee, and now I married her. And the first time I met her boy, who was just 16 now, I met him, we spoke a few words, and I left. And his mum turned round to him and said, Kevo, what did you think of Mac? How would it be if I saw more of him? And he took off his school tie and he pulled it inside out, and inside he'd written Kevo Mac McCartney. He hadn't had a dad since he was 2. You see, we are, first of all, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, brothers and sisters. It would be well that we didn't forget that. Thank you.
Inspiring talk. My question is, how do you fight the dictatorship of the shareholder? You hinted at that. I'm with P&G, and our former shareholder tried to reorient the company towards the purpose, and he got mauled by Wall Street. So I'm just curious if you have any tips for that.
Well, I think, first of all, we have to do it together. Imagine the potential. We talk about potential. Imagine the potential in this room. You see, it's a new story we need. We've got an old, tired story. It's basically about wealth accumulation. It's a tired story because actually our souls call out for something more than that. We have to come together. We have to start writing, speaking, risking stuff. You should check your mortgage, your lending. Make sure that you're not so far out there that you daren't take those risks. Otherwise, you've become a slave. You will conform, and you are no leader. Pull it back in and determine that you will speak the truth as you know it, whatever the consequences. I would answer saying, well, I think Paul Pullman's made a brave stand. You know, he'd taken a stand. He's turned it. Now, we all know Paul Pullman has a number of years. Will he stay long enough? Will he be able to be in that term long enough to pull it off? I don't know. I do know that at the top of every organization, large organizations, probably any organization, there will be some who are maneuvering and shifting around ready in case he should fail. That's not leadership. Shareholders are also, mothers and fathers, shareholders also are, we have to find the way of having the conversations. Somebody mentioned courageous conversations. I first heard that phrase from David White, a poet who speaks to many business audiences. He used to be the chef in a restaurant I once ran. Courageous conversations are courageous conversations. We have to build a firestorm and start really moving it, because it would be so exciting if for no other reason. So exciting. Because who else is going to do it, by the way? The governments? The NGOs? Religion? No. All of the power, I feel, so much of the power is within business. I have to say also, I have a lot of faith in the grassroots. Some of the grassroots movements are also moving in society. But if business took a profound lead, risking, and also coming together in groups like this and exploring what are the ways that we could begin to approach this to our shareholders, how could we do that? But we can do that. When Caesar stood there on the Rubicon River, imagining the unimaginable, that is what leadership is. Truthfully, a leader is a woman or man of integrity who embodies that integrity in their actions. A leader is someone who is brave enough to act on what they know to be true, which makes them quite a rare commodity, because most of us compromise our way. I don't exclude myself from this, by the way. I feel it's a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute challenge. But who of us would not wish to be talked of as a woman or man of integrity, of profound integrity? Not a woman or man who'd sold all our greatest gifts to stuff some money in some shareholder's pocket. It's not that being wealthy is anything wrong with that. I have to say, this Embacum, it was one client of mine who we worked with for 5 years who gave me this brief. He said, Mac, our company is set to deliver a huge commercial success. We have a set of core values that are deeply precious to us. On the day that we realize the wealth of this company, we want to be able to put our hands on our hearts and say we did this without compromising our values. 5 years later, he sold the company to Warren Buffett. He then came to me, loaded with money, together with the other founder. They said, we're confused. We're now wealthy beyond our imagining, and yet somehow it doesn't feel like we always imagined it would. To be honest, we'd already had an aeroplane or two each, a yacht and all the rest of it, even before we started. What makes a fulfilling life, he said. What makes a life of which I could be proud? So I told him about my work with those Native Americans. We went off on a sort of 1 week vision quest journey. And when they came back, They called me in the office, said, Mac, what is your dream? And I described this little valley where we would try and learn again how to be human and try and inspire people to take their gifts and bring them to the world generously to the children's fire. And he pulled out his checkbook and he just wrote me a check that bought 50 acres of Devon and has just given us the chance to make that true. Said, well, now you can live your dream. Native American elders say, you take one step towards life, she will take 10 towards you.